how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. I'm here today to recommend you some seasonal reads. I already managed to get a flu. It has been only 2 weeks into September and it is incredibly annoying, but we'll just have to live with this weird voice that I have right now. This video is going to double as the list of books you can find on Scribd. Scribd is the subscription that I use a lot in my reading life. I definitely check out most of the new releases on Scribd. The good thing about this subscription is that they have a lot of books in their collection and they change it up pretty often. The bad thing about this subscription is that it's not unlimited, as they claim. It is not, but it is the best subscription that I found so far for the buck. And the second thing is that the collection changes up very often. So this video might get old very quickly, but at the moment when I'm filming this video, these books are on Scribd. This video is going to have two parts. In this one, I'm going to talk about cozy romances, and in the second part, I'm going to talk about spoopy reads. Some supernatural reads, perhaps some fantasy contemporary, perhaps some mysteries. But we're going to stay in theme. All of these books are going to be cozy, perfect books to curl up and read while it's raining outside, that kind of vibe. If you're interested in spoopy reads, subscribe to this channel, click the bell button, and you're not going to miss it. On this note, let's get on with it and start with the first series. I don't know about you, but I personally grew more and more interested in historical fiction and historical romance as the weather changes and becomes wetter. So the first series that I want to recommend is Seducing the Sedgwicks. It's an historical romance series written by Sebastian. Sebastian in general writes very cozy historical romances. They just soothe me, validate me, make me very happy and hopeful. The first one in the series is It Takes Two to Tumble. It is a nanny romance which has a very special place in my heart. It follows Captain Philip, who gets a letter about his wife dying and leaving him their children to care for. Captain Philip didn't spend that much time with his wife and his children. He doesn't really know anything about rearing children in general because he spent most of his time at the sea working, and when he comes back he's surprised because his children are taken care of by a man named Ben, who's a pastor. They immediately don't really get along because Philip has very different ideas about the way his children need to be raised. Ben is a bit of a softie, he allows them to get into all kinds of shenanigans, and Philip would not stand for it. So they get into a bit of a scuffle, but Philip immediately realizes that he cannot raise his children on his own. He doesn't know them that much, and taking the only adult that is good with them is a mistake. So he asks Ben to continue to look after them, and they bond over taking care of these children. They're also very attracted to each other. So of course they fall in love with each other and create this small beautiful family. This book is not my favorite from the series, but it is so affirming, and if you love the sound of the music, the nanny, you're going to really like this one. Ben is the older brother, and their family is notorious for being scandalous because of their father, who lives in a polyamorous relationship with two women and who was pretty responsible with his children, so they had to fend for themselves for most of their lives. The second book in the series, which is one of my favorites overall from Sebastian, A Gentleman Never Keeps Score, follows the middle brother, ℝ𝕆𝕆𝕂𝕋. Sedgwick. He got into a sexual arrangement with his piece of shit of a godfather without the Sedgwick senior knowing about it, because he wanted their younger brother, Will Sedgwick, to have a better future, to be able to get an education and get into the Navy. When the godfather dies, he leaves ℝ𝕆𝕆𝕂𝕋 most of his property and money, which immediately draws suspicion and outs them because the godfather has his own son and he didn't leave him much. So ℝ𝕆𝕆𝕂𝕋 is outed and becomes a pariah. He barely has any servants, he doesn't talk to any of his friends, and one time a man named Sam knocks on his door and asks if 𝕝𝕝𝕆𝕄𝕠 could sell him his godfather's picture collection, which is a collection of nudes. Basically what happened is Sam's friend posed for one of the pictures because she needed some money, and now it became a problem. So Sam wants to buy it and clear her reputation, but 𝕝𝕝𝕆𝕄𝕠 doesn't know where the pictures are because he didn't inherit them. So they both team up to find these pictures. And on the journey they become lovers, they heal each other's wounds. This book is very much recommended to people that love hard comfort, which is definitely a thing that I personally enjoy in romance, because I just love when people complete each other. In this book they definitely were well suited. If you also like the Sunshine, the grumpy one trope, you're going to enjoy it. It's more like the Sunshine and the sarcastic one trope, where 𝕝𝕝𝕆𝕄𝕠 is incredibly sarcastic and thorny, and Sam is just such a kind and wonderful man. I especially love him because he's the rare kind of a love interest in romantic novels, especially in historicals. Sam is a free black man that owns a pub named the Bell, which serves as a place of congregation for other free black folk. He's very passionate about activism, about his friends. He's very kind and very generous. Usually in historicals, not only we see white people only, but also love interests almost always are rakes or just douchebags or terrible people that reform by the end of the novel. It is usually an exciting progression, but I do cherish a good, kind-hearted love interest. The last novel in the series, and a fairly new release, is Two Wrongs Make a Right. Follows the youngest Sedgwick brother, Will. Will got into the Navy because of the effort of 𝕝𝕝𝕆𝕄𝕠, but he was abused and neglected in there, so he suffered some trauma which led him into the warm embrace of drugs. He was struggling with his addiction, and one of the reasons why he bit it was his childhood friend, Martin. Martin is the son of the awful godfather that I mentioned previously, and they were the best of friends growing up, even though Martin was mostly confined to the bed because of his sick lungs. And when he grew older, he got sick with consumption, which deteriorated his health even more. And at the start of this novel, Will is taking Martin to the country in hopes that the fresh air is going to cheer him up and is going to help with the severe episode of consumption. They also both had feelings for each other since they were teenagers, so there is so much longing and yearning in this book. The friends to lovers in this is just chef's kiss. I usually don't like friends to lovers, but this one has so much tension, we love to see it. This book is solely responsible for making me into a cottagecore lesbian, so let's give it some credit. Sebastian has another historical series and an FF historical novella, but I don't feel like they are as cozy as this series. For some reason, this series specifically gives me all the found family feels and all the cozy, warm, tingly feels, so I personally would choose this one for fall. The next book is also part of the series, but Scribd only has 2 of the books from it, and the second one that Scribd also carries is not my favorite. The series is called Belladonna Inc. and it is by Lorelie Brown. My favorite book from it is on Scribd, which is a blessing. I've been thinking about rereading it a lot in the past few months because it is one of the best romances I've ever read. The book is Her Hometown Girl, and it follows a woman in her 20s named Tansy who catches her fiancé in the arms of a man. She freaks out and runs away from her wedding. Runaway bride trope is so rare and I love it. She runs away and she stumbles upon a tattoo parlor named Belladonna Inc. She's very shocked by the whole ordeal, so she makes a very impulsive decision and asks for a tattoo. The tattoo artist Kai sees that the woman in front of her is very distressed, and she starts asking her questions while tattooing. And Tansy opens up about her ex's betrayal, but also about how controlling and abusive she was. Since Tansy walked into Kai's tattoo parlor, she feels responsible for her, and they strike a friendship, sort of flirtatious relationship. What I really enjoyed about it is that Kai was not responsible for Tansy's getting better. She was there for her, and she was helping her along the way, but she was not her therapist. The relationship between them was so wonderful, and it wasn't even the soft let me cuddle you because you were in a terrible relationship before me kind of relationship. What I also enjoyed about this is that Kai treated Tansy as a grown-up. They built a very sexual relationship while keeping in mind Tansy's boundaries. What makes this romance a very full vibes romance, in my opinion, is that Tansy is from a small town and she's going back to her family because her ex was so controlling. She didn't allow her to talk with her friends and her family. And that familial feel in novels, in my brain, is associated with autumn. Something I read recently and I think is a new release is Now That I Found You by Kristina Forrest. It is a young adult contemporary romance about a girl named Eve who is the granddaughter of a very famous actress. She recently was invited to act in a movie by a very famous director, but she flunks it because she drinks and makes a parody of this guy's accent and mannerisms, and her best friend posted online. So she's blacklisted everywhere and she's trying to figure out a way how to restore her reputation, and one of the ways is to act in a remake of her grandmother's most famous movie. But to make the role, she needs her grandmother to actively participate in the deal. And while her grandmother really loves her, they kind of fallen out in the past years, and she doesn't really want to give her any favors. She wants her to figure it out on her own. So Eve spends some time in her grandmother's apartment and meets a few colorful characters, and one of them is Eve's love interest named Miles. He's working in a grocery store and part-time lives in her grandmother's apartment, which pisses Eve off because it feels like this guy is taking her place. He is also creative, he is in a band, and Eve's grandmother believes that he's going to be big. When Eve collects enough courage to ask her grandmother for a favor, she disappears and leaves Eve to figure things out on her own with the help of Miles. I don't know why I associate this book with fall, probably because I listened to it recently. Maybe it's the familial feels too, because Eve's parents are very absent and her grandmother is kind of her mother figure at the same time. The chemistry between Eve and Miles is very cute, and the novel kind of feels like a new adult novel, not because it's sexy or anything, but because the characters are so independent. Eve is 18 and Miles is 19, so it's on the cusp. The next series that I want to recommend is the Radleigh University series by Dahlia Adler. I feel like the series is extremely underappreciated. It's a new adult series with a middle spicy level. There are some sexy scenes, but they're not very explicit, not as explicit as some other romance novels I've read, especially the ones that are self-published. I really love university-based books, especially because I feel like even though I went to uni, my experience with it was radically different from what I see on TV or from what I hear from other people, because I went to the uni in my city and I didn't need any accommodations, so I lived with my family and didn't really need a job too. My life was basically the same as in high school. I had a curfew, so I didn't really have the same freedom. I think that's why I love these types of stories. They're kind of a window to an experience that I missed on. The first book in the series is Lustful Enticement, and it follows Lizzie, who was a valedictorian in her high school, but her grades significantly deteriorated in uni because she started partying, hooking up with people, and completely disregarded studying and grades. She's at the party when police finds her to tell that her parents died in a car crash, and she's now responsible for her two little brothers. The thing is, if she wants to prevent them from going to foster care, she needs to straighten up her act. So she starts working on her GPA with the new young TA that she finds extremely hot. She knows that she can't really act on those feelings because he is a TA, first of all, and it's kind of a murky territory, even though they're very close in age, but also because she doesn't want to place her responsibilities on him, even though he turns out to be great with kids, a very good listener, and overall a very kind and compassionate guy. But of course, no matter how much they're trying to restrain their feelings towards each other, Eventually it blows up and they start secretly dating. I know that a lot of people are uncomfortable with this kind of dynamic, teacher slash student romance, but I feel like in this case it's a bit different because he's not really a teacher, he's a TA. And also because I believe he didn't teach her class, or he stopped teaching her class, something like that. Overall, found that the storyline in this one really gripped me, and I enjoyed the love interest. The second book is the weakest in the series in my opinion. It follows Liz's friend Kate. She has the sports scholarship and is on the team. I don't really remember what sport it was, but I don't think it really matters. When she was younger, she was going to sports camps a lot, and she had this friend slash crush with whom she eventually had a romantic relationship, but after the camp they stopped talking to each other. And now she has to confront this episode in her life because this guy named 𝕝𝕝 becomes the student coach of the basketball team. And even worse, she has to see him a lot and act normal because her roommate is dating him. This one perhaps is not my favorite, but I stuck with it and overall enjoyed it, especially because of the friendship dynamics. In the first book, we're introduced not only to Lizzie, but also to Frankie and Kate. I really dig their friendship, especially throughout these 3 books. So the second book I liked, especially because of this dynamic. The third book is about Frankie, who is a pansexual disaster. She hooks up with so many people that it eventually creates a lot of drama and scandal. So she's trying to deal with consequences of people catching feelings when she was only going for the one-night stand, and she starts hanging out with her friends more. Kate, the protagonist of the previous book, gets a new roommate. Her name is Samara. She's a daughter of a Republican governor, and Frankie develops a crush on her, which could mean a lot of trouble, especially for Samara because of her family. Even though it's low-key forbidden for them to date, Frankie feels like Samara is responding to her flirtations, so she pursues her. And Samara indeed likes Frankie back, but she is very cautious, especially because of Frankie's reputation. Samara isn't looking for a hookup, she's looking for a relationship. Samara was this very nerdy girl that was into fandoms and shipping and reading young adult fiction, which is very relatable. She was kind of the 𝕝𝕝 love interest. I think there are quite a few cliches in this book, but because I have not seen this type of scenario in FF romances specifically based in university, I really enjoyed it. The next 2 books that I want to recommend are both by K.J.Charles, and they are historical romances. First one is 𝕆𝕆𝕆𝕂𝕋𝕌𝔹𝕆𝕆. It is about a brother and a sister that live in the country because their parents were very scandalous, and they basically survive on the generosity of their aunt that sends them money but wants to keep them away, so they won't soil her reputation and the reputation of her children. They are pretty happy and content living together in the quiet of the country, but the sister becomes obsessed with a new hobby. She starts writing a gothic novel and even sells it to the publisher. The problem with this book is that the villain in it is clearly inspired by their neighbor, Philip Rockwood, and there are a lot of dark rumors about him. People say that he hosts orgies and praises Satan, which of course at the end turns out to be false. But they don't really know about it, and Guy, the brother, is very concerned about the book and is afraid that Philip Rockwood is going to sue them for defamation. His sister, though, doesn't have the same worries, and one day, to gather some inspiration, she rides to the Rockwood estate to meet Philip Rockwood in person. But her journey doesn't go the way she expected, and she falls and breaks her leg. The men at the Rockwood estate, Philip Rockwood's friends, find her and bring her into the house, and they call for the doctor. The doctor says that she cannot be moved for a few weeks because she might bleed out, which forces Guy to come to the Rockwood estate as well and to protect his sister's reputation. While his sister is healing, Guy gets to know Philip a little bit better, and Philip doesn't really hide that he sleeps with some of the guests in his house, with some of his friends, that they love each other, that it's sort of a polyamorous relationship. Guy is scandalized, of course, but he finds that he is becoming more and more attracted to Philip. So they are exploring this relationship in the book. This novel is also one of these quiet historical romances, which I really like. The found family trope is so strong with this one, and I really enjoyed this little group that Philip Rockwood created for himself. These friends and the things that they do and the things that they care about. What is also something that I've noticed in all the K.J.Charles books that I've read so far is how much of an emphasis she puts on consent. Another book by K.J.Charles that was really cozy is Proper English. It is an FF historical romance, and it follows a woman whose brother married and kind of wants the place to himself. So she has to figure out what she's going to do with her life from now on, because she doesn't really want to stay with them either, and she needs to find a place for herself. She's invited to a shooting party by one of her friends. She is a stellar shooter and won a couple of prizes. She goes and she's surprised to meet her friend's new fiance. She didn't really know, I believe, that he's going to marry someone, and she kind of been thinking that he's going to marry her at some point because he's the only man that she can deal with, basically. She's even more surprised by how attractive she finds his fiance. There are a lot of other guests that came to her friend's house for the shooting party, and even though they all came with an expectation to hunt, someone dies in the house, and because the weather outside is muddy and rainy, they have to figure out who the killer was on their own because the police cannot get to them. It is a mix between a romance and a mystery novel. Both these elements I've really enjoyed. I felt like it was very cozy because it was confined to one house. It gave me a little bit of an Agatha Christie feel, and I also really like the characters. I know that there is one other book in the series that I'm also going to read, and it's also on Scribd. It is about the protagonist's brother. I have one other book on my list here, and it is Style by Chelsea M. Cameron. Chelsea M. Cameron mostly writes FF new adult romances, mostly on the softer side. I picked Style because it's a new adult novel with some sexy times, but it's set in the last year of high school. And I associate school in general with fall, so that is what I'm coming from. It has a very fun premise. If you read a lot of fanfiction, you're going to recognize it as something that you encountered a lot. It is about a popular girl and a nerdy girl that come together to complete an assignment and that fall for each other while working together. I like this book. The only thing that aggravated me was how much of an emphasis was there for them to come out, otherwise they felt like they couldn't be dating. I think in general it's a very annoying trope, but I know that other people are not that irritated by it as much as I am. So if you're not, it's going to be a good pick for you in my opinion. It has fluffy and cutesy moments, it has some spicy moments. The sex actually was written pretty well in this, and also the whole progression of the relationship was very entertaining. I'm not going to lie, I love the popular girl, nerdy girl trope because it's sort of like a wish fulfillment thing for me. So these are all the cozy romances that I recommend to read this season. They're also on Scribd. So if you're using Scribd, you're in luck. As you can see, I read a lot of queer romances especially, so there were not as many straight romances, but also there are so many booktubers that can recommend you straight romances on this platform, so you can go to their channels for that. I can even leave some in the description box, I think. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon with the second part of this video, but until then,